eFootball version 5 is finally here. With a new update, it brings a lot of changes to the speed and acceleration mechanics. In this video, we'll go through everything you need to know with speed and acceleration and how it might affect the way you build your players. Let's start off with a comparison with the previous version. This is what the straight drag race looks like in eFootball 26 compared to eFootball 25. Initially, we can see the new version actually starts off slower, but then it slowly overtakes over the long run. So immediately this tells us two things. Speed is faster and acceleration is slower. I'll get to the acceleration bit later, but yes, top speed is faster in the new version. We can confirm that by comparing just the latter stage of the runs of both versions. In other words, when they are both running at top speed. In the new version, Theo Hernandez is clearly faster, though this is only true from a certain speed stat value. Amadeus posted this graph, which shows a change in the speed curve in the new update. From around 68 speed, the actual velocity is higher than previous versions. We are now seeing top speeds hitting over 32 km per hour, around 1.5 km per hour faster than the previous versions. It is interesting to note that the speed from 40 to 58 doesn't change at all. So if you have a player that has very low speed and you can't get it above 58, then you can forget it and save yourself a few training points. Now, acceleration. This is the bit that puzzles me the most. Amadeus reports that the acceleration zone is now 18 yards rather than the 12 yards in previous versions. Thus, players will take longer to reach top speed. But I find it to be a bit more nuanced than this. To explain this, we first have to understand how acceleration worked in the previous versions. In previous versions, the acceleration stat determined how fast a player could complete the first 12 yards. If you think about it, that's just speed for the first 12 yards. Speed equals distance over time. After that initial 12 yards, which Amadeus coined it the acceleration zone, the speed stat would kick in. But from our understanding, since speed didn't affect the acceleration zone, players with the same acceleration stat but different speed stat would take the same amount of time to complete the acceleration zone. But what would happen after the acceleration zone? Given that players can't switch from one speed immediately to the other, from what I can observe, players take a bit of time to reach top speed from the moment they exit the acceleration zone, and I've created a test to prove this. When a player is running at a constant full speed, in theory you should be able to compare any sections of that run and they should have the same speed. If we use a section from the top speed run as reference and compare it to a section immediately after the acceleration zone, we can see that they're not at the same speed. From this, we can conclude that players are not at the top speed when they reach the acceleration zone. From the very limited amount of footage I still have from the previous versions, I've found that players generally would have already reached top speed after 18 yards, if not before. So how does this impact acceleration in version 5? Well, if we assume what Amadeus reports is true, the acceleration zone is now 18 yards, and we assume that similar to previous versions, player will take a bit of time reaching top speed after the acceleration zone. Then we can assume players would generally reach top speed by the 24-yard marker. If that was the case, then in this example we should have seen the bottom player peeling away after the first 18 yards. But that's not the case here. The player with 99 speed only starts to pull away after around 24 yards. By the way, the training pitch is a bit deceiving. The strips outside of the penalty box are actually shorter. If we overlay a stadium with equal strips, then we can see 24 yards is actually here and 30 yards is here. Anyhow, 99 speed reaches 30 yards first, but only by a little bit. And by using the same test as before, I actually found that players with 99 acceleration actually reach top speed before the 18 yards marker. We can see in this example, 101 speed Danielson reaches the 18 yard line just a bit before and continues to pull away. We can confirm this with another test by lining up footage from the same run, one from a latter stage of top speed and one from the early stage of top speed. lining both up and play them in reverse. The moment they desynchronize will indicate that one is not running at top speed anymore. We would expect them to desynchronize somewhere around 18 to 24 yards, if we go by the 18-yard acceleration zone rule. But that's not what we're seeing here. They are still synchronized behind the 18-yard line, meaning both are still at top speed. We only see them starting to desync behind the 12-yard mark, meaning one of them stops running at top speed somewhere before. So what does this all mean? Frankly, this is all very confusing and contradictory to Amadeus' findings. Am I 100% sure of my testing methods and my data? Absolutely not. So I'm going to present this as my own interpretation and theory, if you like. My interpretation is that the acceleration stat now indicates how fast a player would reach top speed. The higher the value, the lower the distance a player needs to get to top speed. The acceleration stat also determines how fast a player can complete that distance too. Using that section testing method from earlier, we can find out the distance a player would need to reach top speed. Interestingly, players with 44, 56, and 69 acceleration all reach top speed at around the same area. So we can probably assume acceleration below 70 will all need the same distance to reach top speed. This doesn't mean that they all have the same speed. As we can see here, Van de Veen with 69 acceleration clearly has an advantage in the first 18 yards. 75 acceleration sees the biggest jump in the top speed zone compared to 70 acceleration. And if we put all the results together, this is what it looks like. Whether you buy this theory or not, one thing we can all agree on is that having low acceleration sucks in this update. Stick around till the end to see how that might affect how you build your players. Let's move on to dribbling speed. Previously, we found that dribbling and speed stats both have the same importance in determining dribbling speed. In other words, for example, 90 speed and 70 dribbling would have the same dribbling speed as 70 speed and 90 dribbling. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore in version 5. We can see in this example, Maradona and Okafor have reversed speed and dribbling stats, but Okafor with a higher speed stat is slightly faster. Immediately this tells us speed stat has more importance in determining dribbling speed. Taking a look at another example, even though this Odegaard has 99 dribbling but 75 speed, he has the same dribbling speed as a more balanced 81 speed and 85 dribbling build. These are the results of my testing on dribbling speed, measuring the time taken for a player to dribble the length of 3 strips outside the penalty box. These are some of the selected runs just for demonstration purposes. With these results, my theory is that it's now about 70% speed and 30% dribbling, with only a few results that didn't fit within this equation. But interestingly, they all have 99 speed. I redid a few tests to see if there was a bottleneck with low dribbling and high speed. And that does seem to be the case. Okafor with 93 speed but 75 dribbling is slightly behind here, despite having the same weighted score. So, with our new results added in, we can probably conclude that having 90 and above speed, but dribbling below 90, then the dribbling speed will be nerfed a little bit. Dribbling acceleration has also changed in the new update. In previous versions, dribbling acceleration on the ball is solely determined by the dribbling stat. In version 5, acceleration stat now has an impact on dribbling acceleration speed. But just like the acceleration off the ball, acceleration on the ball continues to be a pain to verify and test, probably due to the inconsistencies and difficulty in recreating identical testing scenarios, but I will give you guys my best understanding. For this test, I'm measuring the time it takes to dribble the first 3 strips from outside the penalty box. Again, bearing in mind each strip is a bit shorter than 6 yards. Just like dribbling speed, it doesn't seem like dribbling and acceleration stats have the same weight in determining acceleration on the ball. Though at this point in time, I cannot determine what the exact ratio is. But if we look at the results with 75 and 99, at each interval, 99 dribbling seems to be better than 99 acceleration. Have a look at another set of results. When dribbling is dropped by 10 points, acceleration would need to be increased by 15 points in order to have the same result. This is true for all three intervals, which might tell us that dribbling weighs more. One thing I noticed is that acceleration stat from 80 to 99 scales quite poorly, meaning the increase in acceleration stat in this range has little impact on dribbling acceleration. If we look at the results of the first strip, 80, 85 and 95 practically have the same results. Okay, this is only less than 6 yards, so it's hard to conclude anything. But if we look at the second strip, sure, there's a steady increase from 75 to 95 acceleration, but it is minimal. Especially looking at these two here, going from 85 to 99 acceleration was only faster by 1 frame. Looking at the third strip again, going from 80 to 95 acceleration had minimal gain, whereas going from 85 to 99 dribbling saw a better yield in speed. So in conclusion, it would seem that dribbling stat has more weight than acceleration stat in determining dribbling acceleration. On top of that, acceleration over 80 seems to have diminishing returns. It would suggest that the effectiveness of acceleration stat on dribbling acceleration is not linear near the top. I would imagine it a bit like the curve of the speed graph, except it is probably a lot flatter. So does this mean we shouldn't level our players above 80 or 85 acceleration? Absolutely not. Dexterity training also increases offensive awareness and balance, two stats that are very important for forwards and good dribblers. It is hard not to level up those stats just because you might want to save a few points from acceleration. On top of that, off-the-ball acceleration is still very important. Having higher acceleration will give your players an edge over defenders with low acceleration. Konami has confusingly added this line in the changelog. Does that mean attacking awareness also influences acceleration? Well, yes and no. No, because in my testing, attacking awareness doesn't seem to have any influences on acceleration or speed. But that's only because I'm controlling the player manually. Attacking awareness only influences acceleration when it is the AI making a run. We can see in this test, by doing a 1-2 pass, it sends the AI into a straightforward run. Messi with higher offensive awareness gets to the edge of the center circle a bit quicker, and he also gets to the third strip quicker. Amadeus also confirms this and concludes that if the player has the cursor above their heads, that counts as manual run, and attacking awareness doesn't affect the player's acceleration. This includes sending a through ball for a player to chase. The player still has the cursor above his head, so attacking awareness doesn't affect his acceleration. Where attacking awareness does have an effect on acceleration though, is whenever a player starts running without a cursor above his head. This counts as an AI run. That includes players making a run after 1-2, players making a run during a counter attack, or fullbacks making runs down the flank. Again, basically whenever the AI is controlling a player, which makes sense because the awareness stats control AI behavior. I just wished Konami had been a little bit more clear with their wording and clarified this applies to AI movements only, but this is typical Konami. They like to be as cryptic as they can be. Anyway, Amadeus produced this helpful chart, which shows the attacking awareness from 90 to 99 doesn't change the speed of acceleration. Even comparing 80 attacking awareness to 90 attacking awareness, you're only losing out by 1 frame. Where it does change a bit more drastically is when attacking awareness is below 80. At 70 attacking awareness, the player is 3 frames slower than 80 attacking awareness. So this probably applies to midfielders like Zaire Emery and Kovacic, but these kinds of players are not known for their bursts of speed, so I don't think this is going to be the end of the world. Amadeus also reports that attacking awareness doesn't affect the top speed of AI runs. Konami has finally made changes to the stamina system, so that stamina will now also impact speed. In previous versions, players could still run at top speed even when the stamina is completely drained. But how much does stamina affect speed now? For this test, we're comparing the same player when he's running at full speed. The top video is the reference with full stamina, and we'll be comparing the player's speed at different levels of stamina. At around half stamina, the player is around 3% slower. At 33% stamina, the player is 6% slower. At 25% stamina, the reduction is the same. When the stamina gets to red, the reduction is 10%. The reduction is around the same when the stamina is completely drained. If we compare this to De Jong, who has 77 speed, they seem to have a similar top speed, which would back up the 10% reduction theory. So from these tests, we can conclude that players will at most suffer a 10% reduction to the speed stat. It is important to emphasize this 10% reduction is applied to the speed stat and not the speed itself. If we use the data from Amadeus again, let's say a player has 100 speed. At 0 stamina, he will have the equivalent of 90 speed, which is a reduction of 0.64 kilometers per hour in velocity. But if a player has 90 speed, at 0 stamina he will have the equivalent of 81 speed, which is a reduction of 1.39 kilometers per hour. So that is to say, for players that have below 90 speed, then at 0 stamina they will suffer more reduction in velocity than players with over 90 speed. Stamina also affects acceleration, though Amadeus reports that this falls under the general 20% stat reduction applied to all stats when a player has 0 stamina, except for speed of course. You can see here, at 0 stamina, Lamine Yamal, who has 86 acceleration usually, has a similar acceleration speed as 70 acceleration, which is around 18% stat reduction. A similar test was done on Mbappe here, again supporting the 18% reduction theory. So safe to say, acceleration suffers a lot more under the influence of stamina. The next test we'll do is on stamina's effect on dribbling speed. Does the 10% reduction to speed also apply to dribbling speed, since it takes the value of both dribbling speed, or does a general 20% reduction apply to both stats? For this test, we are using Yamal again, measuring the time taken for him to run 18 yards at top speed. At full stamina, he has the same top speed as someone with 77 speed off the ball, which supports my formula. At 0 stamina, if speed takes a 10% reduction and dribbling takes a 20% reduction, then he should have the same top speed as someone with 67 speed. But as we can see here, he is still slightly slower than 67 speed. So let's assume the 20% reduction applies to both dribbling and speed stats. Then Yamal should have the equivalent top speed of 62 speed off the ball. Lo and behold, this is the case here, with only one frame of difference. If your players have no stamina, then please sub them off, otherwise they will be very slow. So, in summary, this is your TLDR. Top speed in general is faster, while acceleration is slower. Amadeus finds that the acceleration zone is now 18 yards instead of the 12 yards previously, but in my testing I find that acceleration stat influences how long it takes for a player to reach top speed. The lower the acceleration stat is, the slower it takes and longer it takes in terms of distance. Dribbling and speed have different weighting in determining top speed on the ball. Instead of the previous 50-50, it's now more like 70-30 in favor of speed. And the formula to find the equivalent off-ball speed is 0.7 speed plus 0.3 dribbling, and altogether multiply by 0.9. Acceleration stat now influences acceleration on the ball, with dribbling stat seemingly having more weight, though an exact ratio cannot be concluded. acceleration stat from 80 and beyond seems to have diminishing return in acceleration on the ball. Increasing from 80 to 95 often has very little impact. Attacking awareness only affects acceleration of AI runs. Any player that doesn't have the cursor above his head would count as AI controlled. Attacking awareness doesn't affect speed. Stamina now affects speed, but at most, players would only get a maximum of 10% reduction in speed stat. So if a player has 90 speed at 0 stamina, he would have the equivalent of 81 speed. Acceleration gets more reduction at 0 stamina. I found it to be around 18%, but Amadeus finds it to fall under the general 20% reduction to all stats. The 10% reduction in speed stat doesn't apply to dribbling speed. Instead, a 20% reduction to dribbling and speed stats is applied. So, after all that information, how does it affect player training? Well, it depends on how you play. But for centre backs, builds with very high speed but low acceleration are not viable anymore. So I'm looking at centre backs like Van de Ven and Dan Burn. Since I've been blessed by this Van de Ven card, I decided to test him out, giving him 90 speed and 62 acceleration. Obviously he was no match for Yamal, but even up against Messi with 80 speed, he still can't catch up after 36 yards. Even against Saka with less acceleration, still no match. But what about against these players on the ball? Because on the ball, in theory, they should be a bit slower. Still can't really catch up with Yamal. What about against Messi on the ball? He can catch up with him, but only seems like after around 36 yards. Now with Saka on the ball, yes, Van der Ven is faster after 36 yards, but Saka's stats here are quite mediocre. Now, if we use another centre back, for example, this Ruben Dias, 78 speed, 74 XL, not great, but his performance is actually quite close to Van der Ven's, with the benefits of being actually ahead after the first 24 yards or so. So yeah, safe to say, having extreme speed and acceleration stats is generally not a good idea in this update. But let's say you're stuck with this card and you have no other options. It seems like sacrificing a few points off speed and put them into acceleration is still a good idea. Let's use a crowd favourite as an example here. Again, taking a few points off speed and putting them into acceleration seems to be more beneficial under 30 yards. Testing out a few builds for Nesta here, focusing on the top one and the third one from the top. Again, a more balanced combination of speed and acceleration doesn't seem too bad. Obviously, if you can get both to 90 without compromising defensive stats, then that's the dream. So as a general rule of thumb, if the player doesn't frequently run over long distances, say more than 30 yards, then speed doesn't matter as much. If you play with attacking fullbacks or wide midfielders in a 3 at the back system who are constantly bombing up and down the sides, then yes, speed is still important for them. For centre forwards and second strikers, again, it depends on how you play. If you play counter-attack tactics, then yes, maybe speed is important, since the players will run forward like headless chickens as soon as they are in possession. But for me, who needs to play 30 passes before I get to shoot, my centre forwards typically don't need to run a lot. For wingers, it might actually make more sense to put more points into speed rather than acceleration. If you use your wingers on the ball a lot, with dribbling speed now leaning more towards speed stat and acceleration stat hitting a plateau at around 80 when on the ball. For players like Blitz, Curler, Messi, it really does seem like the 100 acceleration from the auto build is a bit of a waste, so it might be worth downgrading that and put the points into speed. One thing to note for these wingers, I've been enjoying these double tap R2 speed burst to burst past these defenders with low acceleration. I find it to be a bit more effective in this update, so maybe this is something you can try as well. So that's it for this video. I know there was a lot to unpack, but hopefully it was all very helpful. This video has easily taken me well over 100 hours to make, so I want to quickly thank my channel members for supporting the channel. My channel members get to see videos like these a week before everyone else. If that interests you on top of other perks, then do consider supporting channel by clicking the join button. If you don't want to, that's absolutely fine, but you can still support the channel by liking this video. I'm not asking for much here. You could even share this video if you're feeling generous. Anyway, you know what to do. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.